putting it in the hands of first responders as a self-referral tool. So it doesn't reach command level or command referrals, which usually enhance the stress and anxiety that these folks are going through, because it's usually coupled with discipline, which they have to face when they get back from a treatment process or whatever it may be. And it just kind of resets everything in motion.
Okay.
There's sometimes you can't get past that, right? You can't get past the command referral.
Yeah.
You come to work fucked up. You hit a tree. You get a DUI. You have an argument with your spouse, where another agency's called. There's nothing we can really do about that.
Yeah.
We can get you to help, but we also got to get you to reframe your mind as to pointing the finger to everybody else as being the problem, and taking out that quote unquote pocket mirror and looking at the person in the mirror and realizing that you're the problem, and how to, number one, come to terms with that.
Yeah. Sarge, don't get too deep into it. We haven't even started recording.
I'm sorry.
Jeez Louise, man. Let's just do it now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. Derek here, and I got with myself a pretty cool guest, one that I've had some history with, but right now he's doing some great things. This is Rich Creamer, who's a former sergeant on Norfolk Police Department. Now he is a officer wellness guru as his unofficial title. The man is he's actually rivaling me for best beard for 2023. But these things have yet to be determined because we still got a few days left in the month. But essentially, running, I would like to go through your accolades and such, but I always ask my guests, if you could describe yourself in 2 sentences, Rich, what would those 2 sentences be?
I got to use 2 sentences?
2 sentences, sir. We have to have structure. If not, we're just going to be no greater than the beasts outside.
I think I can sum it up in a word, though, Derek. I think once I say the word, you'll kind of understand why I can sum it up in one word. Yeah, you kind of alluded to the fact that we've got some history together, and I think because of this word is the reason why we have the history. So if I had to sum it up into, I know you want to say 2 sentences. If I had to sum it up into one word, it would be authentic.
I like that, and I would agree 100%, because there's no filter, which has been great and could be somewhat problematic, but that's okay. When you speak I heard when you speak the truth, it's at all times it leads you on a great adventure. So being
that
authentic, being authentic is great, because there's nothing soft about it, but it's like iron. It's strong, and sometimes it hurts, but that's okay. Well, that's great, man. I love that. Way to take my challenge and make it even more challenging. Again, authentic. I love that. So hey, we're here today because you're doing some great things when it comes to officer wellness, and being 2 former police officers. It's super important. There's some perspective I'd like to go into. There's a couple of things I saw that actually came out yesterday that I wanted to talk to you about. But first, just kind of, just walk us through your journey to this point and where you're at and what you're doing.
Well, number one, thanks for having me. I think this is probably a long time coming since you've started this podcast, and I've been an avid listener. So kudos to you and this adventure, as well as your current adventure outside of the world of policing. Mm-hmm. It's great seeing you doing so well, and seeing the family grow, and I love seeing it. I love seeing a redemption story, and that's what I see in what you and Sutton are doing. So kudos to you both.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not big on talking about myself, so I'm gonna give it you're gonna have to prod a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
I think we can probably take it, as far back as you'd like. If you want to keep it.
Rich Creamer showing up at 2500 North Military Highway, ready for day one of the academy. If in fact there were buildings back then that were still there, or
No, no. So I'm going to take you further back. I'm going to take you back to 70, I think it was 7665 Sewell's Point Road, which is where the Walmart back parking lot is right now. What used to be the Second Patrol Division in Norfolk. That is where the academy that I went to was, and this was a kid recently removed from the U.S. Navy. Over there, I was at Little Creek for a little while, being a quote unquote taxi driver to really cool guys that are doing the real work. I was just a lucky kid from Boston as an undesignated person that got some really cool orders and made it worth my while, and was able to do a lot of cool things. But that really didn't transfer over into any other position except for policing.
yeah,
I had a small little injury during an operation. Did some damage to my knee. Got healthy, but not healthy enough to stay seaworthy. So I was honorably discharged, and then
you
3 months later,
literally lost a sea leg.
literally lost a sea leg. Yes, yes,
That happens, man.
it does. 3 months later, I was in the Norfolk Police Academy.
3 months.
3 months.
What year was this?
This was the year of 2000.
Oh wow, year of 2000, before everything changed.
Before everything changed.
Oh, wow.
So year 2000, it was a 21-year-old kid, a bit abrasive, being from the Northeast.
You? Oh, come
Yeah,
on.
yeah. I was not received. I was not received very well, which was fine. I kind of knew that going in. I was going to be the outsider. I knew of the. It was no different than being being in law enforcement up in the Northeast. It was kind of like you had to know somebody who knew somebody, and I kind of got that vibe when I was in the academy. But I made it through. Did fairly well. Got got my orders to the Second Patrol Division. Didn't have to leave the building. Stayed in the building. Did patrol for 6 years. High intensity patrol, bike patrol, you name it. I did it while I was in the patrol division. Spent most of my time working nights, overnights. It was right around the time we had our first kid, so there was no daycare. I would get off at 8 in the morning, drive very fast home, so my wife could drive to Virginia Beach to her job as a guidance counselor in one of the schools in the school system there. And we did that for a couple of years, and then moved out to Chesapeake in 2006, right around the time, or right after the time I went from patrol to the detective division as a gang detective. And I spent most of my time doing gang work and violent crime work just in general. During that time for about eight plus years. And I fell into the trap that a lot of cops do. We become, identified by the position. And luckily for me, I had an informal mentor that said, Rich, go ahead and grab this back pocket, and I'm going to take you on this journey with me.
Mm-hmm. Who was
And
that
in
mentor?
doing so, it was Alan Epstein. He is and still is a mentor of mine. He kind of saw me kind of going in the direction that I think most young officers do.
Mm-hmm.
They're working 16, 18 hours a day, meeting up at the FOP to talk about the cases that we were working.
Yeah.
And I put talk in the quotations because there was no talking going on, but there was plenty of drinking going on.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw that, that was the opportunity to kind of, lower our guard down a little bit and try to numb how we were feeling. Luckily for me, I come from a background of addiction, so I didn't really fall victim to that. But I think with him, kind of recognizing that I had the potential to go down that path, he kind of scooped me up and dusted me off and gave me an opportunity to go back to the academy and become an instructor. Where I pushed a couple academies through with a phenomenal team over in the training division. Whether it was at the range or in the actual training division.
Yeah.
And I look back on the folks that I was able to just put my thumbprint on. I would never say that I had such an impact on them, but I was able to leave a thumbprint on a lot of the folks that were in my classes. And I look back and you look at the agency now, and these are all top tier folks, man. The SWAT operators, canine operators, detectives, etc.
You're seeing the fruits of your labor there.
Yeah,
Investing in other people, yeah.
Right, and that's what I wanted to do. That was my purpose for going. Was just like every other cop in the agency is like, oh, training's putting out garbage, whatever. And I just saw it as an opportunity to say, okay, look, I'm going to make my impact on these classes, and some of them have gone on to the federal agencies. Yeah. So like, I feel like I made that impact, and I still keep in touch with a lot of the folks that were in my recruits under tutelage, and they reach out to me for not only just to kind of check in, but also just as a mentor as well. So
yeah,
I think that really gave me the opportunity to really look forward into supervision, that leadership role. I took on a leadership role soon after. I left the training division and went to our criminal intelligence unit, where we would do in-depth, high-scale investigations on stuff going on throughout the city, as well as dignitary protection, etc. I just happened to go around the time where there were some things going on in this country that really sparked a movement. And this was during the initial BLM movement in the country. But I can say, based on the ability to connect, we were able to connect with folks that were driving that voice throughout Hampton Roads. I can say that we had no incidents in the city, under my my time there. Not only as an investigator, but as a recently promoted corporal when they brought back the corporal rank. So with that said, as a corporal, I was supposed to get moved just based on the status quo of doing things. You get promoted, you get moved. But they kept me there, which was unheard of because it was a sergeant's billet. My lieutenant then at the time was Epstein. He retired early, and we were left with no lieutenant, no sergeant, just a corporal and some folks to kind of take care of the day-to-day, as well as some task force officers assigned to the three-letter agencies. And until they had made a lieutenant, I had run that unit and oversaw the operations of that unit for about 7 months. New lieutenant came in. It was right around the time I was finishing up. Oh, by the way, I was going to college during all this time.
Of course, it can't just be simply one path.
Right. So I was going to college. I got my undergrad in sociology right around the time I left the detective division, and maybe the first 6 months of the training division, and then I told my wife that was the worst idea I've ever had. I was not built for school. So,
okay.
So she was like, no, I really think you should get your master's degree. And I was like, there's no way. I graduated in December. That January, I was enrolled at Liberty University in my master's in counseling. So
happy wife, happy life. You better listen to her.
Right.
Man.
Yes. Right. Right. Fast forward, left the criminal intelligence unit, took the test for sergeant, was not quite a sergeant yet, but I had my master's in counseling. I had a background in informally helping people get resources throughout my career. Saw a lot of people lose their career over not having access to resources or not knowing where to go or who to talk to. And really wanted to make a change to the current state of what the peer support was. Chris Gallen did a phenomenal job in building the blueprint for what is standing now.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that presentation when we were cadets, or like in the academy. Him coming out saying, "Hey, here's me, Mr. Hotshot. Here's the things," and we'll talk more about these off track, as you said before, these off track behaviors.
Right.
But it was just so impactful to see, like, yeah, this stuff comes at a cost. All this high speed stuff does come at a cost. So that was definitely the framework for you guys.
Yeah. So like he had built out the original team. He had formulated the policy. He had done all of the things that needed to get done to really have this standalone peer support team and peer support unit. Mm-hmm. But he also had a path outside of the police department. So he was looking to retire. I was looking for that sergeant's billet, and we just had this conversation one day, and he asked if I would be interested. So, obviously with my background in counseling and my training and just my inherent wanting to help, it seemed like a good fit. So I was then transferred to that unit, where I started my journey into building out a public safety wellness initiative for the city, that kind of carried over from not only the police department, but into fire, into our dispatch center. And here recently, in one of those initiatives, we actually were able to get the sheriff's office on board with some of the things that we were able to give to our public safety members in Norfolk.
So, yeah, then we'll get into what you're doing now, but I wanted to take a step back. So because my path in the police force kind of followed your path as far as escalating. It was a little bit more contracted because it was over 5 years, but escalating into doing well in patrol, then getting some high-speed positions, and then be like, oh, yeah, this is awesome. But for you, after patrol into gang suppression, what was that moment that Epstein told you, like, what was the culminating moment where Epstein told you, hey, grab my back pocket? Obviously, it's probably like a talk like when I came to you, like, hey, these are the things you're doing, dummy. Like, it seems great, but it comes at a cost. What was that moment for you?
I think it was more so, I had a lot of success. I had a lot of success as a gang investigator. Not just doing the local crime, but obviously I was attached to a pretty high level federal RICO case that we were able to take down the leadership back in 2007. And I think I just got to a place of complacency. I got to a place of I've been there, done this. I also had somebody in the agency, tell me that I outgrew the agency, and that I needed to move on.
That 2007, 2008, was that the gang war that was happening in Norfolk?
Yes.
Yeah, that was that big gang war that they had, and then they was taking those people down. Okay,
yep.
In the RICO case, awesome. Yeah, going into the academy, we heard about this. It was like Crip Blood or something like that, gang war that was going on in like the Park Place area, was it, or just around Norfolk?
Yeah, but fair majority of it was Park Place, Huntersville.
Yeah.
But the Bloods had a pretty much a stronghold throughout the city. The Bounty Hunter Bloods in particular. And that was one of the bigger cases that I was able to work, as well as one of the bigger homicides in the Ocean View area, over there off of 16th Bay, where a relative of some Navy folks was beaten to death by 13 members of the Bounty Hunter Bloods in a mob assault death / robbery. But we were able to convict all 13 under numerous statutes. And one of them, we were able to take that case federal after establishing a criminal enterprise in the first case. So we
Yeah.
were able to take that one as well. So,
You
like
know,
I said, we just got to a point where I got complacent and I wouldn't say lazy, but I felt that what more can I do?
yeah, you're on
Like,
a high horse, right? You're on the
right,
high of just kicking indoors and getting these cases and putting, PB&J, putting butts in jail, right? So like
right,
and I get that. It just and then hearing this, like other people that are hearing this that don't understand like completely the full scope of what involves with like what you're exposed to in law enforcement. All that sounds amazing, right? Like high
sure,
fives, beers, beers back at the FOB, let's go. But it's like, but the actual details of going to the scene, seeing, going to the morgue, seeing the autopsy done, like seeing this person being beaten to death and just the body sitting there. That's one of 100 scenes that
sure,
you've seen.
sure.
Walk me through that impact. Like that, is it direct impact? Is it passive impact? Like, how does that affect you when it comes to seeing that?
I think, and that's why I asked how far back you want to go. So, like, I think my childhood played a huge role in how things impacted me. I had a lot of weird activity that surrounded my upbringing. I had what I thought was just a normal, just normal everyday things in a small suburb of Boston. You know, I kind of I felt like I empathized with folks in the city a little bit better because of where I came from. I grew up in public housing. I grew up around a lot of narcotic activity. I
Okay.
grew up around a lot of I wouldn't say violent crime, but like every day somebody was catching an ass whooping for something.
Mm-hmm.
There was banks being robbed. Just stuff like you got numb to it. It just became part of your everyday life.
Yeah,
Like it wasn't.
I get what you're saying. You were part of the real life, the Departed movie in Boston, or what was it? The Town, basically.
Yeah,
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 but
yeah.
in a real sense, but in seriousness, coming around, you're on a podcast called The Trauma Behind the Badge, and which is
Right.
great because it airs out all these things that people might not know about law enforcement, but like part of that is being desensitized at an early age to constant discourse, constant trauma, vicarious or direct. You think, like, hey, like that just makes you more accustomed to what you're exposed to in law enforcement, which is direct trauma and vicarious trauma. That is, you are put into, your job is to be forced into that system of, this cycle of trauma. And
Right.
hey, if I already had it on my plate, so it's not new, so it's not going to impact me. Let's keep
Right.
going.
And for the longest time, Derek, like a lot of us, we have a tendency of doing a really good job of putting that mask on every day. It's part of the uniform, right? We put the uniform on, we put the gun belt on, we put the vest on, and then we put our mask on. And that mask is to kind of, hide those general feelings that we're feeling. We can't let anybody at work know that we're suffering from anything, because then we'll be labeled something at work, or we can't let somebody see how a scene impacts us, because we don't want that quote unquote stigma attached to us, right? But I want to say, like, my biggest impact, the things that impact me the most on that job, and even in that short time I was, in homicide and stuff like that, were the kids. I had a shitty scene, within the first year of my patrol time, that, I held on to that scene for a long time because I had some guilt behind it because of response time. It was a quote unquote domestic, right?
Yeah.
You dispatched to the domestic, and then as you're gaining more information, you're now realizing that you're walking into a pretty volatile scene,
Yeah.
and then upon our arrival, like within 10 seconds of us arriving on scene, the suspect, who was the father, had taken a shot at the mom who was in the front yard and missed her, but then took two of the children that were, I want to say at the time, under the age of 5. Both kids were under the age of 5.
Oh, wow.
Into the home, and there was a 12-hour standoff.
Barricade situation with the father in there with the two small children, and then
Right.
the firearm involved.
Yes. And, just like Norfolk does, we set up a good perimeter. We did everything by the book.
Mm-hmm.
There was some talk about going in, not going in, talking, not talking.
Yeah.
We had the negotiators out there doing what they do. And then the call was made to make entry. And once we made entry, me being the new guy, you hear all the screaming on the radio and you go running. And what I was not in the right mindset for was what I was going to see. And this was, a child with a pillow over the top of their head with an apparent gunshot wound. And then another one in a back room that was suffering as well. And then, the suspect suffering, still alive, but suffering from a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Yeah.
So that was
like the,
right. That was my introduction. I had been to the suicides.
Yeah.
I had been to the suicides. I had been to the gunshot victims. I had been to all this stuff. But that scene, I replayed it in my head for a long time about if I had just gotten there a little bit sooner, could I have made,
mm-hmm.
And what I had to realize, and what I think a lot of us don't realize until we get a little bit older and a little bit more seasoned is, that chapter was already written. And no matter whether I got there 10 seconds earlier or,
mm-hmm.
30 seconds earlier, that chapter was written.
Yeah.
And there was really nothing I could have done any differently to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. The paradox is you are a position, a profession of control. Your
right.
whole job is about control. And you go to a situation where you have no control over that. And you then
right.
We're all about doing, like, after a situation like that, how can we do it better? Professionalism, tactical expertise, control. And then there's things that are happening that are outside of your control. How do you cope with that?
It's unfortunately, Derek, it took me a long time. It took me a real long time. And it's something that I still struggle with control and just being, the quote unquote alpha personality, right? I think it's my approach to growth. It's my approach, the buzzwords resilience and, resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. It's a great buzzword. And I think we have a tendency of overusing some of these words within the wellness field. And I just think it comes with the growth of you as a person to realize, hey, look, man, like there's only so much you think you have control over.
Yeah.
And, one of the biggest impacts that I've had is literally going through schooling and educating myself on some of the reactions that I've had as an individual, and realizing just how fucking normal it is to feel the way I was feeling.
Yeah.
It was not abnormal. And the normalization of that is something that I try I strive to let folks know, hey, look, it's normal to feel this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously long term, no. But in the short term, it is okay to feel the way you're feeling.
Yeah. Well, having, like, when you talk about that, like where you are now, having resiliency is essentially like taking hits and then being able to build stronger from those hits, as far as mental health, psychological, like wellness and stuff like that. When I first started seeing those things, everybody remembers their first child mortality. We call it, as senseless as it sounds, we call it your first dead baby call.
Right.
As dejected as that sounds, as far as just senseless and unempathetic, it is what it is. And you start to see like you could go down a really like dark path when it's like, okay, well then just this today could be my day. Life is just whatever. You just see a bunch of crap and it's like a defense mechanism when you first see that stuff where it's just like, oh, just I don't have control, so screw it. But then that defense mechanism starts to permeate into your own life as far as the decisions you make, where there's a number of times where I'm just like out on the street, like, yeah, if it's my day, whatever. But then my decision-making process is based off of that, that assumption where it's like, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to take this time for myself. I'm going to work out a little bit more, spend less time at home, those off track behaviors, because it's like, woe is me, whatever. I don't have control. I'm not this big old bad person. I'm going to keep that mask on.
Right.
Keep promoting that and have a good time in front of my peers. But, looking in the mirror, it's like, like whatever, dude, it's whatever. Like, because you don't have control and it's absolutely sucks. But like you said, the chapter's already written. Once you figure out that that's okay, you start to just get ahead of those off track behaviors. It's like, look, hey, listen here, dummy. That's a short-term response to a long-term goal that's not going to work.
Yeah, self-awareness was something that I had to, unfortunately, I got the School of Hard Knocks version of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I don't regret any of it. I think that's what I needed as a person was that how to train myself to be more self-aware, to kind of feel that emotion. Like I can't stop the emotion from happening.
Yeah.
But I can recognize it, and in recognizing it, I can take a step back and be that self-aware person and go, is this the right time to open my mouth and say what I want to say? Mm-hmm. Right? And react the way that I want to react? Or is it a time for me to reflect and go, you know what? This isn't going to make things any better. And I'm saying this more in a personal sense than a professional sense. Mm. I was going to say what I wanted to say professionally. I mean, Derek, you know me.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing. It didn't matter what rank you were. Like if you were wrong, I was going to let you know what you were wrong and back it up with facts.
Yeah.
But in a personal sense, you kind of touched on it a little bit when it came to control, right? Mm-hmm. Because we have all this control and we have all this decision making that we have to do 12 hours, 16 hours a day, we have a tendency of finding that fucking spot on the couch that we don't want to move from when we get home, the 2-3 days that we're off. And when we're asked certain questions about our personal life, like, what do you want for dinner? Or what's going on? Or, hey, what about doing this? Or what do you think about doing this?
You're talking about like with your spouse, like just especially with your spouse.
Yes, especially with your spouse.
Yeah.
Instead of or having a dialogue, what we tend to do is, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care what we do. You make that decision. I've been making fucking decisions all fucking week. You make the decision. Mm-hmm. And then that starts that headbutting that, goes on personally. So now you've built this, and I've said this to you, and I've said this to a lot of people. If your home is dirty, it doesn't make work any better. And what I mean by your home is dirty, I don't mean there's clothes on the floor, there's shit in the laundry. I'm talking about the relationships you have with your spouse, your children, basically your core nuclear family.
Yeah.
If that is in shambles, I promise you that any public safety position, whether PD, fire, dispatch, deputy, whatever it is, because of our inherent want of control and what we want to do and put that mask on and go to work, that's going to catch up. And we talk about those behaviors, risky behaviors, off-task behavior. Those are going to catch up, because what's easier for me to do if my home life is in shambles and I'm not getting along with the people in my home, and there's a shift that comes up that I can make a little extra money, and I take that shift, and now I'm gone for 16 hours instead of 8. And then my buddy next to me says, "Hey, let's go to the FOP, or let's go here, or let's go there, and grab a beer." Are you more likely or less likely to do that if things aren't copacetic in the home, right?
Yeah.
You're more likely to go,
Yep.
because now you're avoiding. It's that avoidance behavior,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to deal with your actions. Essentially, it's
Yeah.
not. It's their reaction to your actions, but you don't want to deal with your actions. It's the old, head in the sand type reaction,
Mm-hmm.
or we have a tendency as first responders to do this, right? It's a them problem.
Yeah.
It's not me, it's them. My wife, she just doesn't get it. She doesn't understand the job. If I had a quota for every time I heard that, I wouldn't have to do the things that I'm doing now, because I'd be a rich man.
Yeah.
They don't understand, because it's a job, the job, the job, the job, the job. No, motherfucker, it's you.
Yeah.
It's you.
Yeah.
It's time for you to take a step back and realize that this job doesn't define who you are as a person.
Yeah.
This job will replace you tomorrow.
What was the you are 3 emails that you gave
That's
me?
it.
3. Tell me the
Yeah.
3 emails. That is
Yeah.
I really think that and it's not a way to be, and I'm going to preface this with, it's not a way to deter people from law enforcement or public service, because that is worthwhile. There are just some things that come along with it that you have to be knowledgeable about. And I'm glad we have these resources, and we'll talk about what you're doing now. But with the 3 emails, it gives perspective on priority. Just what are those 3 emails?
Yeah. So, you talked about, when I made it to the academy, and I'm sure it was the same thing for anybody that's listening, or for yourself. You got the email. You got the, "Hey, welcome to XYZ Police Academy. This is your hire date. This is the day you'll start the academy. My staff and I, wish you the best in your journey into law enforcement, fire, etc." Everyone has gotten either that letter or that email. Some of us a letter, because email was not like as used
Didn't
as
have
much,
computers back then, so we sent
No, we
everything via line.
right. Horse and buggy.
Yeah.
But that's the first email, and we get so excited, we get wrapped up into that, right? And then we have this journey through our career where, like, I talked about a little bit of my career and some of the success that I had, and some of that identity started to creep in. But you know them just as well as I do, Derek. It's the guys and girls that the blue line underwear, the blue line this, the blue line socks, the blue line hats, blue line stickers on the truck. Same can be said for the fire guys with the
cross axe, whatever
cross
that
axes.
thing is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, whatever that thing is.
Right. So, like, we get ate up with that identity over a period of our career. Some of us we hit it, we kind of travel through it, and we come out on the other end going, "Oh, I'm glad that I passed that. I passed that portion." But some of us go through that portion, and then we get into a specialty, and then we become that identity, and then we go to another specialty, and we become that identity. Mm-hmm. But it all comes back to the job identifying us as people. And what I'd like to tell people is, like, do you remember the person you were before your significant other or family member pinned that badge on your chest?
Yeah.
Do you remember that person? What did that person like to do? Give me a couple hobbies. And they tell me, "Oh, I used to fish, I used to surf, I used to do this, I used to work out." And I ask them, "Well, when was the last time you did that?"
Yeah.
And it's like, "Well, the job, the job. And it's like, come on, dude. Like, it's not the job. It's the decisions that you're making. So now we fast forward to that second email, which usually goes something like this: "Congratulations on your normal service retirement. My staff and I wish you the best. Don't forget to give me your gas card, your RSA token, and whatever else that comes with it.
You can buy your gun for $1 or whatever it is." Yeah.
Right. So, you get that. And, what happens after that, if you're lucky, is somebody on that police department remembers who you were, or they were a rookie or something like that. And depending on how much your time you have left on Earth, you get that third email. And that third email is the stinger, because that third email is, hey, do you remember that guy that did that thing? I think his name was Rich. I think he worked in peer support or some bullshit like that. Yeah, well, this is his funeral arrangements.
His obituary. This is where the service
Yeah,
will be.
and this is where the service will be. And I think we get so caught up in the middle of 1 and 2 that we forget about what it's going to look like when that third one comes out. Because I'm here to tell you, as a person that was on the police department and had many of people, pass away, I can tell you that the only people that were truly there were that nuclear family.
Yeah.
So, like, you may have had representation from an honor guard, right? Because that's the right thing to do. Maybe a couple of folks who kind of show up. So in that 1 and 2 email, it's that legacy, right? We talk about legacy. You got to leave a legacy that your family can be proud of. Not one that, hey, do you remember Derek when he was here? He did X, Y. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Because I promise you, after that second one comes out, they have already replaced you.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, it's a business. Don't get it twisted. It is a business. That's why they have a recruiting team. Mm-hmm. They want to recruit new people because they know they're going to have to replace the old ones.
Yeah.
And that's just life.
Yeah.
But it's what you do in that between email 1 and email 2 that will define email 3. If you do everything that you're supposed to do and you do it well, that email 3, when that does come out and you have that showing of the impact that you made on people that you worked with, that's the legacy that your family's going to remember. There's not only did you make an impact on them, but you also made an impact on so many people in that 20, 25 years that you were a part of this organization.
Yeah.
And that and then, you say what you want, but that's going to carry, your kids and your spouse so far because they're going to have that support system. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were a person that did year 1 25 times, you're really not leaving much.
Yeah.
Except for being that body that filled a billet, essentially.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is do well wherever you go, but don't lose sight as to who's going to be there the day you retire, because you have to go home to that nuclear family. And I've made the comment, and I've continued to make the comments. I've been retired 2 years now. And I essentially, in this 2 years, have had to reintroduce myself to my family. My kids have said, man, if I could only have had this dad growing up.
Oh, wow.
So these are, and this is, that's stuff that I gotta deal with.
You gotta wrestle with that, yeah.
And I understand it from their point of view. I understand that I wasn't there for certain things. I was always there for football, whatever.
Big stuff. The big stuff.
Yes. But I think my wife made a comment the other night that, hey, your kids knew where you were all the time. Mm-hmm. Like you were either working out, or at home working overtime, or working overtime.
Okay.
So it wasn't like out gallivanting and doing whatever. But in doing that, now they say things like that because of the way I react to things now. Mm. Because the way I reacted to things then was very much as the protector, right? And that's what we do. We want to protect. And that's why we don't talk to our families about shit that's going on with us, because we want to protect them from that.
Yeah.
But we also want to protect them, especially as they are growing into this community, right? Mm-hmm. We don't want them to be impacted by the things that we've been impacted by.
Yeah.
So when my kid tells me, hey, I had to walk home from school today and I had to cross this median over a, 4-lane highway. Instead of saying, man, I really wish you wouldn't have done that. You should have, called me from the school or did this or did this. It is automatically in your face. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like,
And
you're going to get killed. You're going to get killed.
You've personally
Right.
seen
Right.
what happens when people do that and they're unsuccessful.
Right.
Those auto fatalities and those pedestrian fatalities, that's what flashes, right? Because it's always the extreme of like,
Mhm.
yeah.
I think we take that to the extreme based on those traumas that we've picked up along the way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, well, it's the strongest impact in our brain, that signal, because when we saw that, and that's part of the education you talked about. Knowing self-awareness is, okay, the chemistry that goes on in your brain when you experience stress and trauma leaves a physical signature in your brain and your body that is then tapped into as a survival aspect of your brain, where it's like you think of, like, when I think of Church and Virginia Beach Boulevard, I think of like two things. One, I think of the car that's flipped over, and you've got one officer who unfortunately was like, there's blood everywhere. Anyway, but just seeing the scene and dealing with that and the family. And then when I think about busy intersections, it's tied into that. And I also think about the shootings that have happened there at that intersection. And so if my kid taps into that at all, being aware of that auto response from us, that hype and like, oh my God, you can't do that. This is what we got to do. I'm the protector. I can't have you experience that. God, please don't let you experience anything close to that. We've got to curb that.
Right.
Which is even harder, because it's like now we're fighting against ourselves.
Right. And for the longest time that I did that. I was in a constant battle with myself. Now, Derek, I am not the guy that was in an officer-involved shooting. I will never be able to tell you what that feels like. Yeah. I will never be able to, never. Like, I was lucky. I was very lucky in my career that I did not have to experience that. But that's not to say that I didn't experience the aftermath of that. Mm-hmm. Of folks that I knew personally that had been involved, mm-hmm. and the impact that it had on them. Yeah. And then generally the impact, vicariously that it has on us, right? So I've always been the guy, kind of like, like you said, trauma, just taking it in, right? Just
soaking it up.
I told you, a long time ago, we're all born with a backpack, in our life, kind of, we take things along the way and we put it in the backpack. All of these adverse childhood experiences, traumas, whatever it may be, military trauma, exposure to shit, during combat, whatever it may be. Mm. And then we decide, we're going to go do this other job where I'm going to be impacted on almost a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
In some form of fashion, almost a daily basis.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep stuffing that shit in that bag. And then what happens is stuff starts falling out. And you're like, oh shit, you get nervous because you don't want anybody to see it. So you go back to stuffing it, and you go back to stuffing it. And as we're stuffing it, we're numbing ourselves with the drinking, any substance abuse, mm-hmm. off-task behavior, all stuff that we kind of hit on a little bit today. And what I didn't really get into, and you kind of hit on it a little bit, is that we have this weird, we program our minds to think that today is the last day. Like, today could be it for Rich Creamer, for Derek Proctor. So I'm going to go buy the fucking $80,000 truck, and I'm going to go buy the $500,000 house, and I'm going to go buy the boat, and I'm going to go do this because tomorrow's not promised. And, that's how I'm going to live my life. And I'm here to tell you, based on experience, it never works out very well from a financial piece, right? Because, what are we doing? Now we're chasing overtime. Now we're chasing part time. Mm-hmm. Now we're chasing all the stuff that we were told not to do. In our minds, we go, well, I can pay for that. That's like 2 shifts here. Mm-hmm. I can pay for that. That's 3 shifts here. That's all our way in dealing with some of the stuff that we've been exposed to.
Yeah. And that would be different. It'd be different if it was a business where, like it's almost commission based, where you can just say, oh, I'm going to go do this and just make money in very simple transactional business, versus this job involves life and death,
Right.
trauma, liability, like all these greater things. So it's not just, it should not be, it would be irresponsible really to make it a conversation as simple as, oh, to do these things that are short term, instant gratification based things like the truck, the house, the high speed,
Right.
this things for me, I'm going to go expose myself to even more over here.
Right.
And it's that simple, where it's not, where you can get yourself into some seriously heavy situations that are going to have lasting impact, that it goes beyond the scope of just financial compensation. It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But we program ourselves to do it. I always make the statement, and it's probably not well received in the wellness community, but it's the fucking truth. Is we're the stigma, because I know you sat through the same academy that I did.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some new classes or
We had
whatever.
computers. That's about it.
Right. For a basic academy, I don't remember DCJS having a class on suppressing your feelings. I don't remember them having a class on not normalizing your feelings. I don't remember them having a class on off-task behaviors
Mm-hmm.
and how they can make you feel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. Did you remember a class like that?
The only thing we got was Sergeant Scallon, but he talked about his there wasn't developed as well as what you have going on now, and we'll jump into that here after this. Is it was, this is my story, and Sergeant Scallon's story was just, it was very impactful, but it was
Right.
that was one day, but then it was amongst all the other days of the academy where it's like, here's all these things you got to learn, this attention to detail, be in control. Then, oh, real quick, check it out. There's some consequences of what could happen down the road. Okay, back to it. Get to DTs, get to shooting and all stuff like that. So if I could go back and capture what it said, like then and then kept that as, because now it makes sense. But like going into that, if I had that in the back of my mind, that might have offset a few things that I experienced, because it was like, holy crap, you don't realize until after you've survived, possibly losing everything with your family, to go, who was telling me about this? Oh crap! But that was it. That was it.
Right.
There's nothing. There wasn't anything in the academy.
Right.
And
And I'm glad you brought up the shooting pot, because when I speak, whether it's on a podcast or whether it's in person at a conference or a classroom setting, I always bring this up, and it's it stings. It's a stinger, especially for the administration. When I have an administrator in the room or a chief in the room, I ask them, how long do you have your folks at the range in a 26-week basic academy? Give me days, give me weeks, however you want to break it down. And Derek, how long do you think you were at the range?
specifically at the range, I would say about 3.5 weeks total. We do a pretty good job, though, over there at Norfolk as far as getting range time in. So I know it was the initial week, range week, and then, there was going back to it to the different platforms and live fire exercises and such. But I'd say about 3.5 weeks.
So in 3.5 weeks, that's what? Let's put a number up. About
25 days.
150 hours, maybe a little bit more, maybe 170 hours.
Yeah, a little bit more.
Time.
Probably. Yeah. 25 days.
So 25 days, 170 hours on the range to utilize a tool that maybe you may have to use in the course of your duties. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I just told you, 24 years, I've never had to pull the trigger. I've taken the slack out.
Yeah.
I've had to take the slack out a couple times,
Yep.
right? But never had to pull the trigger. I know that there's some hard data on that, and I want to say it's in a very low percentage of folks that go through their full professional career never having using their service weapon.
Mm-hmm.
The sad reality of it, though, Derek, is you're more likely to use that service weapon on yourself,
Man,
than you are in the course of your duties. And what we do is in 25 days or 175 hours, and I get it, we're learning how to stay alive. And how many times did you hear that in your academy? we're training you to stay alive, whether it be in DTs, it's in DTs, or it's in at the range. We're training you to stay alive. And what bothered me is, no, we're not. We're training you to stay alive on the street, but we're not training you to stay alive. And I saw an opportunity when I came over to the unit to change that. And Norfolk was a pilot agency for the University of Penn and IACP's First Responder Resiliency Program.
IACP, what is that?
The International Association of Chiefs of Police.
Okay.
They kind of their best practices type organization that they're kind of policies and best practices for law enforcement agencies throughout the country. I'm on their list of officer wellness SMEs that agencies can kind of utilize for some consulting and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But we were a pilot agency for this program, and I did a top-down approach for the initial pilot. I went from the deputy chief to a 6-month recently graduated recruit in a class full of about 40 to go through a three-day class. And most classes, when we talk about, mental health, just in general, it's usually met with the folded arms, a lot of scowls.
I literally can see it in my head, by the way, just the folded arms sitting back, because you see it all the time when it comes to doing your what was the concurrent training that we had? What was that called? Your in-service. Yeah, in-service. Doing your in-service. I mean, yeah, I could see that in my head. Absolutely.
Right. So we had that. By day 3, at the end, I had people hugging instructors that were not law enforcement. These were all PhDs, psychologists from the University of Penn, teaching, hugging, shaking hands, thanking. If I had this X amount of years ago, I wouldn't have gone through the struggles that I'm going through now or have gone through. So I saw the impact and went through, had 10 of us go through a train the trainer, and I brought it back. And that was kind of met with a little bit of resistance because I wanted to integrate 3 days, that 3-day course into the academy.
Yeah.
And that was met with, well, we don't have the time. We don't have the time. We don't have the time.
Time for what? What were they saying when you brought
it? It was more so as an excuse because they had to hit DCJS requirements. But being a former instructor, I kind of knew what the first couple weeks looked like. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, why don't we integrate it in that first before Hell Week at the range? This will kind of be able to let their guard down a little bit, give them some skills that they can integrate in their day-to-day in the academy, and then take out to the range to kind of calm them down and perform.
Yeah.
So when I put it like that, they were like, all right, you got 3 days. So I was able to get 3 days in the academy. I was also able to get all 8 hours for in-service.
Okay.
So we were able to train every Norfolk police officer in these resiliency skills through in-service. And then as folks were coming out of the academy, because some of the language changes, when you talk about thinking traps, or you talk about, learned optimism, or you talk about real-time resiliency skills, these are things that these kids were coming out of the academy talking about because they had it. Mm-hmm. And I wanted the folks that were on the street and doing the job not to be like, what are they talking about?
No, they need to benefit first. They need to be benefiting first because they're the ones that are experiencing it directly.
Right. So we were able to do that, and we were met with, like I said, I was met with initially the folded arms, but as I started to kind of really integrate both personal and professional life into the training, I think it had more of an impact than most will talk about.
Most will admit to.
Right, because you know as well as I do, after that last slide goes down, and I thank everybody for their time. You're usually met by 1 or 2 folks that stay behind, mm-hmm. and in most cases, we were met by 5 to 10.
Well, that's awesome. It may not seem like a lot to folks that don't understand it, but when you're focused on the next task at hand, you're just getting out of there and maybe one or two people stay behind. And sometimes those are just people that are overly excited about the subject or nerds or whatever you want to call them to
Right.
justify you leaving first. But the fact that you have 5-10 people, that is an indication of impact. Absolutely.
Right. Right. So, we're able to do that. And that's where the education and that preventative impact really started to begin. And then sending out messaging throughout the agency through email, reminding folks during, I think it was COVID and through the holidays and how to reframe your thoughts and stuff like that. So it was received, and it was received fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
And then integrating, we talked about the facility dogs. We were able to integrate 2 facility dogs within the agency right there with the peer support folks.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I heard, initially was like, oh, the dogs, your dog going to give me a hug and all that stuff. And, the typical banter, right?
Well, I mean, if you think like the initial reaction to it is like, no, my problems are my own. I've soaked this in. I've taken this in for my family, and I'm not going to let something that feels like a gimmick at first,
Right.
like, oh, this is gimmicky, or this can't be real, or it's just like some kind of, oh, dogs, how's that? But dude, they work. Like,
Yeah.
like you have, like I remember coming into your office and just stopping for a second and petting a friggin' dog. It just it just lowers your guard, and that's okay. You need to find some, whatever the mechanism is, find it to lower the guard and get the steam out, or get some of that crap out of your backpack, because it gets heavy. It does.
Right. Right. And at the end of the day, when we talk about the backpack and you brought it back up, is I want people to be able to drop that bag, open it up, take what they're comfortable with, take it out, and then put that backpack back on and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And kind of leave whatever it is behind.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to have to keep carrying stuff. And if I give you opportunities to slowly unpack, that load gets a little bit lighter and it gets a little bit easier to carry, right? I'm not telling you you're going to get rid of it all.
No.
But it gets a little bit easier to carry.
Yeah, you got a 25-year hike ahead of you,
right.
And you got to drop some stuff along the way, because if not, it's going to break you.
Right.
Going to break you. Now, I will say, before you left, because you've started your own initiative outside the police force, before you left, what did your peer support group entity within the police department look like in action? Like, when you have, because I think about application, when you have an officer go through a traumatic scene, as often they do, the response before, when I first joined, was, like, I think about like the murder-suicide that I went to in the green sector, where the guy went up to his wife, shot her in the head, and then went up to his office and shot himself. And then we show up, and it's Phil and Zach and me clearing this extravagant house, and we see the wife on the ground, puddle of blood, and then we're like, crap, where's this guy? It's a suicide by cop. We clear it out. I show up to his, clearing out his office, and I see him in his chair, hole through the head, just revolver in his lap, and then it's like, all right, let's go to the next shift. But what does it look? What did it look like when you left?
So we tried to set it up twofold, really. Having that home base for officers to feel comfortable. I think for the longest time we were like this hidden entity, and we were always. They did a good job of placing us in places that nobody would come. So I think the first initial office was literally outside of the sergeant's office and next to a couple lieutenants' offices. So if anybody was coming to that office, it was like, hey, yeah, I'm coming to see them because I need some help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too high vis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I said, you know what? You want to make it high vis? Let's make it high vis. So there was an old driving simulator room in the training division that had the double doors. Mm-hmm. So you literally had to walk down the hallways of training to get to where we were. And it was okay. It became less about who saw me go in and more about accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
I have access to this resource.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a good job. If somebody was in there and, we were talking, like signs went up on the door, like we're handling business right now. Don't ask us for anything.
Yeah.
But I think the accessibility became part of the culture. Like like you said, you may not have needed anything, but you knew that you could come by the office, interact with the dogs, ask us how things are going. We may ask you an open-ended question, and that may lead to something else.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just come in, mess with the dogs, say thanks, and go hit the street.
Mm-hmm.
So I think accessibility was a big portion of it. And then secondly, there was like a standing in the general order, like if this criteria was met, these type of calls, we would get informed by field command. And it got to the point where officers that may not have actually been at the scene or involved directly or more indirect contact would beat the field commander to the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And we would show up to the call. We would just kind of show up. And whether that's, just being at the scene, just being another face outside of your supervisor or the field commander, a familiar face, somebody that's non-judgmental. And I'm doing a full scale up and down. Like I'm checking in, like, hey, are you good? Can I get you something to drink? Hey, have some water, blah, 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 blah. And then just reminding, hey, listen, if this made you feel some type of way, you know where the office is. I'm going to be checking in with you. And it was the checking in.
Yeah.
It was the follow up.
Yeah.
And I think that follow up meant more than just being there.
Yeah.
People often would say, "Oh, what do you have to be out here?" But no, I don't. I don't have to be anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's a choice. I don't have to text you. I don't have to call you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think coming from having the approach of being, and I'm going to use the word again, Derek, but being just an authentic person, just genuinely giving a fuck
mm-hmm.
about people,
yeah,
went a long way. And I think, it gave us an opportunity to really grow and become a model for other agencies.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what we did. We became a model for our neighboring agencies in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake. And we were even called out to many of their stuff,
yeah.
and helping those folks out. So we just had that reputation, and that reputation in this line of work is everything.
Oh yeah,
just like your reputation is on the street, just like your reputation may be in the detective division, SWAT, K9, whatever. That reputation follows you wherever you go.
Yeah, the part that I wanted to see when you first talked about it, because I remember you going down the halls and you had 12, I think it was like 8 to 12 initiatives in your hands. You're like, well, I'm going to put this in front of the chiefs, and you got like 3 or 4 approved.
Yeah.
In that, I was hopeful for, a situation where, you go to a call like I just described, where it's completely just, like you don't have time to process it, because after that scene, how terrible it was, you're going to go to the rest of your shift. But the street supervisor, that sergeant or that corporal, recognizing, okay, Proctor had a rough shift, so-and-so had a rough shift. Let me reach out real quick. Hey, here's the IBR, or here's the incident report number, Rich. Can you, come to the next roll call, check in with this guy? I wanted to see more of that, and I'm sure you've had it here and there, but like almost make it not a mandate, more organic, because it feels more authentic. But like that's right. What I wanted to see from the supervisors, which was, hey,
that was one of the biggest hurdles was. It's a juggling act as a patrol supervisor, as any supervisor within a police agency. It's a juggling act, right? So I can't really point the finger, but I can understand where, okay, we're the last people that you're thinking about. I totally get it.
Yeah.
But that's where those informal leaders came in, Derek. That's where the folks like a senior person on a platoon would make a phone call or send a text and be like, hey, I think, it'd be beneficial for, you guys just to kind of pop in.
Mm-hmm.
And we would do it. And we would do it. Like you alluded to, like we would do it, maybe not as often as we we could have. Um, but then, we would also do those type of initial check-ins, but those would also lead to more one-on-one impactful resource allocation
Mm-hmm.
for that individual that may be carrying that load for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So while not a formalized policy, it was definitely done in a more informal way.
Yeah, and I think that would be the way, because anything that a police officer or law enforcement, once you're in the game, it's, this is like, just like in service, it becomes a song and dance, and we don't like dancing. If it's like, oh,
Right.
I've got to go do this. It's no, you got to keep it. There is that aspect where you have to keep it more organic, more open, and the ability to where it might not happen every time. That's okay. So when it
Right.
does happen, it does have the highest probability of impact on that officer.
Yeah, I'll give you, without naming names. There was an incident involving an initiated pursuit. The pursuit was called off. There was a proximity death that ensued. That person that initiated the pursuit had to go answer some questions, and this was not your run of the mill person. This was someone in the executive staff.
That was in the pursuit.
Yes. When I showed up, it was number one, the body language was more of a "I didn't know you did this" type stuff.
Okay.
Right? And then secondarily, it became that had more of an impact on me than I thought it would.
Okay.
And then thirdly, thank you. Right?
Yeah.
So at that level, and I talked about it with an agency before we got on this call. If your executive staff isn't versed or educated on this topic, you're behind the eight ball. You're behind the eight ball, because I can, as an executive, check the box. The check the box program.
Yeah.
Say that I have it. But if I don't truly understand what those folks are doing on a day in and day out basis, it's really putting you behind, because you as an executive are looking at what? Discipline, right? And before I left, I had something drafted to where we could take discipline, but we could take this.
A diversion, if you will, more of a wellness diversion. Yeah.
Right.
And the benefits of that are, it doesn't impact. It's, we're human. Things happen, and it's creating, like you talked about, the stigma derived from like long-term permanent repercussions for seeking help, because the initial view was, oh, you are unwell and incapable of conducting the duties of your job.
Right.
Versus like, hey, you had an episode, you're human. Let's understand what's going on here. Get you back up on that horse.
Right. And I think honestly, Derek, I think we're starting to see the shift. But, what is interfering with that shift is a lot of, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but that's okay. I think it's the rapid growth of this industrial complex that is
First responder wellness.
I think for so long we had nothing. Now everybody has become their own entity. Everybody is writing a book. Everybody is, got a nonprofit. Everybody's, working. And I think that they're all doing great work. It's when other entities get involved, like a corporate entity, because at the end of the day, I will guarantee you that the fair majority of our first responder agencies don't have a line item in their budget that says wellness.
Like actual funds that are allocated towards, all right, we got this much for ammo, this much for gear, and this much for mental health and resiliency. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet that you don't have that. So what comes along is a lot of these corporate entities that get involved in first responder wellness and team up with nonprofits or other entities within the industry. And I really pains me to say that word, because we've lost touch as to what the true meaning of this whole initiative is, and that's the people. And it's not, we've become this industry almost overnight. We've become this industry almost overnight, and that, just like everything else, is, well, whose person says this, but this person over here is saying this, and this person is saying that this is this, and this is the best, and now it's become so convoluted with people who, if you take a real deep dive into people that have never done this job, telling people how they need to, go about living their life as a first responder.
Yeah. It's got to come from within, obviously. It's got to, if it's for the people, just the same reason why, and I get a lot of civilians that ask me, like, why does each jurisdiction need to have why are they different? Why is each jurisdiction different? Why isn't it just like a federal police, and why are laws different based on the states? Well, it's because it's made of the people, and the people together they're all, people are individuals. They're all unique. They're not special, by the way. You're not special. You're unique. Okay. But we're all unique. And then that group is unique. So it needs that like proprietary group specific approach. You can't do that with an industrialized, as you say, wellness in a box approach, which is like, one size fits all, which is absolute BS. It has to be approached from within, an expert who's unfortunately usually experienced these things, but has survived and then gets educated on it. That has to come first, and then it needs to be led by those kind of people.
Yeah, and I think the cookie cutter approach it's an easy fix. It's the check of the box.
Yeah.
Yes, I have an application. I have dogs. I have this. I have that. Well, if you don't have trust and legitimacy within your organization and within your program, then you have nothing. If you don't have that trust and legitimacy with the folks that are doing the daily peer-to-peer interactions or your critical incident stress debriefings, you have nothing. It becomes the dance that you're talking about. It becomes it's just another thing I got to do to check a box to make sure that I get back out on the street as fast as possible.
Okay.
So I think my advice, if I had to give it, and if anybody wanted to listen to it, is do your research. Do your research on the people that are trying to sell you on different products or different, consulting opportunities or anything like that. I'm not the know-all be-all. I have a network of people throughout the country that I can tap into. And I would, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to point you in that direction. Like, I don't need to know everything. I don't need to know everything about this particular topic. I just know that taking a cookie cutter approach or a check the box approach is more detrimental to any agency than actually taking your time and doing it right.
Now we get into what you're doing now, right? This is a long time coming, right? Like both in this podcast and also in what you've done in your path in life. Almost, not almost. It is your path in life. What are we doing now? You have this foundation called Lighthouse. What are we doing now to further that initiative now that we're outside of the system?
Yeah, so since I've retired, I was a Lighthouse customer as an agency. Lighthouse builds out mental health and wellness applications for public safety. My initial leap into that was as a strategic wellness director, basically taking in, doing the intakes of agencies, seeing what they wanted out of a product, and then shifting it to our customer success team to build out a more customizable application for their agency with internal and external resources. Fast forward, I got promoted to Director of Public Safety Insight, where I still do some of the intakes, but I also work as an advocate with agencies to get away from the cookie cutter approach and literally work with the people doing the job every day. Now, I may have to work with administration I may have to work with their wellness coordinator, but my interactions are with the people that are doing the job every day. And when I'm doing an initial assessment with an agency, I want to know what they want out of a wellness initiative. Not what the chief wants, not what the wellness coordinator wants, not I want to know what the people in that agency want. If they want a wellness initiative, if they want a physical fitness incentive, if they want dogs, if they want education, if they want it all, and then giving them a blueprint to go forth and conquer.
Yeah. They apply their own nuanced approach to it. Here's the framework. You fill it with the substance that is your people. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And in doing that, I've been able to, touch a lot of agencies throughout the country. It's given me, it's expanded the network, obviously. But it's also given me, you talk about retirement and you talk about losing your purpose after retirement. I just never lost the purpose. I think the purpose has changed a little bit for me. And I kind of felt a little bit separated from my true purpose, which is people. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of what I do is through, Zoom conversations and emails and stuff like that. So I miss the interaction and the group dynamic with people. So I've been able to, work with my old partner, John Hines here recently. John has taken it upon himself to really put himself head and shoulders in the substance abuse arena for first responders and military.
Yeah.
He went and got certified as a certified substance abuse counselor, is working towards his licensure as a clinician, and even in a PhD program now.
Oh, that's awesome.
So he's doing great work. And, I kind of hit a bumpy road a couple months ago, and I don't know if it was fate. I don't know what it was, but, he had reached out to me. There was an agency on the other side of the water that they were doing a wellness fair for to kind of talk about the stuff that they're doing. And he was like, why don't you come up and talk about Lighthouse? So I did. And just so happened that his boss was there that he currently works for. Mm-hmm. And after I was done, the boss was very forward with me and she asked me, why aren't you working for me? So, Johnny has been on me for a couple of years now to put my education to work, to which I've taken him up on that offer, and I'm starting my journey towards that certified substance abuse counselor certification under supervision right now. But I get that group dynamic back. I get to talk to my military and my first responders in that group setting. That's what my purpose lies, is being able to touch people, being able to have these conversations with people and do it in a way to really, this may sound corny, but I don't give a fuck. To really inspire some hope in them, to recognize, yes, you've hit this bump in the road, but there is a pathway. I just need you to follow this pathway. And yeah, you might fall off from time to time, but know that there's a safety net there. And that safety net is this network of people that we're building around you. So, so I'm doing that. I'm doing some teaching. I'm doing a little bit of everything. I still teach that resiliency course. Virginia Beach Fire has been great. They had me come out and teach that course, an 8-hour course to their recruits in the academy setting, and it's been well received. I'll be keynote speaking for the 100 Club of Illinois on kind of like my story that nobody really knows. So I'm really hoping that this type of impact will really kind of guide me over the next 10 to 20 years, into taking place of that old purpose and really developing that new purpose for myself.
That's exciting to hear. Like, when you're a police officer, you kind of have an enclosed path. You know where things are going, but here it feels like when you're talking about, like, especially like just this more recent interaction with Johnny Hines, like that's an exciting adventure where and it's all driven by your want, not versus a need of a city, but your want to make that happen for you. It's so great to hear, Sarge. Really, it is. We're we're getting there, man. We're about a $1.30 right now. But this has been great. I want to get into, I want to get you back on here because there's some other stuff, especially more recently, that comes with initiatives, especially on the national level. But it's great to talk to you, man. This is a long time coming. I super appreciate, especially when I first started talking about doing a podcast and having to take a hiatus because of the whole civil thing that was happening. But it's good to have you on here finally, man. And I really enjoyed this. And I hope you did too. Cause yeah, this is the important stuff that people, and kind of why I want to do this podcast is to get behind the badge, get behind it and see what's going on there in the heart and minds of folks, and even in public service and military, just because there's a toll there that we just need to get ahead of it. It's not like it's some kind of damning thing that's going to, prevent you from joining and serving. It's just, hey, here's some things you need to know about, because if you get ahead of it soon enough, it does become a big thing. We just let it.
Well, I think for so long though, Derek, is what has happened is, we see the initiatives for the military, we see, all of the data and the numbers behind, veteran suicide, and we see a lot and we hear a lot, and I think, I don't know, I think a more purposeful action in doing and not talking. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think we can talk about it all day long. You could have me on here for 5 fucking hours talking about this. And at the end of the day, it's finding like-minded individuals throughout this country, getting together, never mind, checking the fucking ego bullshit at the door, and what the bigger picture is. Mm-hmm. The bigger picture isn't me. It's not you. It's the people that fucking are putting themselves in harm's way every fucking day, whether it be overseas, whether it be in the streets, whether it be, responding to fires, whatever it may be. We've talked about it long enough. And I think, the impact that I'd like to make or try to make is to build that network of like-minded people that literally fuck all the I don't need the accolades. I don't need the bullshit. I just need people to know that, number one, they're not alone. And number two, there are fucking resources out there, and let's get you the help that you need. Yeah. And there's no fucking shame in that, dude. Like, there's no shame in getting help. There's no shame.
Yep. No stigma.
So
no stigma.
None. No, we created it. We fucking created the stigma. So starting fucking today, I am going to, I am one of these LinkedIn guys. Every now and again, I'll chirp. But I think, from now on, I think my hashtag is going to be "We Are the Stigma."
Yeah.
Just to bring some awareness to it, man. Like, we need to change our attitude when it comes to this topic, mm-hmm. because, everybody's like, "Oh, I don't want to get help because of the stigma." Well, we created it. So the more everyone goes to get help, then guess what happens to the stigma? The stigma becomes no longer, because it just becomes part of the deal. Like, hey, look, man, I need a tune-up. I need
That's
a
all
fucking tune-up.
It's just a tune-up. Yeah. I mean, we need time to recover. I mean, all aspects of life, we need a tune-up. That's as simple as simplifying it is that, like, that action of simplifying it is what we need to do. And I absolutely agree with you there. So what we'll do is we'll cut it here.
We'll part one this.
We'll part one this. We truly will part one this. And what I'll do is I'll take your Lighthouse. I'll link it down below. If you're okay, put your LinkedIn down there too for folks to reach out to you and such. We'll definitely do that. And yeah, resources are everything, but this has been awesome, man. We'll part one this. We'll definitely put another one on here. I'll get you back on here, and just looking at that beard, man, just that's what I get out of this, sir. But it's great to have you, sir. Any last words?
No, I think I pretty much nailed it on that last part. Like, for those that are listening, I am not the end all be all, but I will definitely find you the answers to whatever it is that you need.
Yeah, let's do it together, right?
Yeah, and if you're like-minded and you're not looking for the pat on the back or somebody to tell you what a great job you're doing, hit me up, because I think we can make an impact.
Sounds good. All right, brother. Well, take care. For y'all, take care. God bless. We love you, and do something good today. And that concludes this episode of Solo Surface Podcast. I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank Upbeat for providing the musical intermissions featured in this episode. Now remember, you can find us on Podbeam. You can also find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and now you can find our episodes on YouTube.